This is the Troutbitten podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout. This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten podcast, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swantowski. I'm the owner of Troutbitten and the author of Troutbitten.com. So let's talk about selectivity. I think the trout is prized as a game fish because it's picky, because it's selective. It often requires a pretty refined presentation to fool a trout, especially wild ones. And in large part, that's the draw toward fishing for them. Now, in every region, in every stream, trout habits can differ from other trout in neighboring watersheds. We know that. And across the fishing landscape, we find places and we find moments when trout are more picky, more choosy about what, where, and how they want to eat their food. So I just said moments because we've all seen the fishing change in just a few minutes. We've all happened upon bite windows of periods of trout feeding more regularly, where we happen to have the right fly and the right presentation to meet the preferences of those fish. Likewise, we've all had a good thing going on where we're catching a lot of trout and it all just shuts down quickly. So there's a lot to this idea of selectivity. And tonight we're here to dig into what makes a trout selective. The quick answer is the theory that angler pressure makes trout more picky. I think there's no doubt about that one, and we'll talk about it in detail. For sure, our fishing, our presentations, us just being out there, educate the already picky trout what not to eat, where, and when. Now, some of that I think is overblown or exaggerated. Really, we use it as an excuse at times because we're looking for good excuses. But a lot of the angler pressure effects are absolutely true. And we have those factors in mind whenever and wherever we're fishing. So many other reasons for selectivity are natural, meaning they have nothing to do with us fishing for the trout. These things like low water, stable temperatures, and the prevalence of, let's say, one easy food form at the moment can also make an already picky, tough to catch fish even tougher. So this is a good topic. There's a lot to dig into, and the Troutbitten guys are here with me to do just that. So real quick, guys, just say a couple words so everybody knows what you sound like. Here is Dr. Trevor Smith. What you doing, bud?
I'm enjoying a beautiful evening. It feels like summer out here.
Staying light longer.
Enjoying the weather. Yeah. We had a big, long power outage last week. I don't know if you guys had that.
We did. What did I tell you to do? Because you didn't have power? What did I tell you to do?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yes, you do. I
didn't have power.
I said, go plug into somebody's generator, your neighbor's generator.
Yeah. I have a prominent neighbor
figure
in the community.
Popular figure.
Yeah.
Sometimes popular, sometimes not so popular.
He couldn't sleep because his generators were so loud. I think he has like 10 of them.
Is that right?
He wasn't going to be without
like
power,
Christmas
though.
over at his house.
Oh my gosh.
The whole neighborhood is suffering. And he's there with 10 generators. I said, just run an extension cable over there. That'd be fun.
Not a bad idea.
Next time. All right, so here's Austin Dando. Due date is in 5 days. I know. We've been talking about it every podcast.
Getting closer and closer.
You're on
This
high
time
alert.
next week. Yeah. Could be.
Just got a haircut too.
Might
for
not
the
be here
occasion,
next week. Yeah.
Right? Looking good.
Gotta look good. Can't look bad in front of the kid.
No.
That's right.
Don't want to get judged.
Still haven't picked a name.
Nope.
Any
Couple
favorites?
ideas.
Want to reveal something?
Nope.
My prediction is that you miss next week's podcast because you have a baby, which would be a great reason to miss the podcast.
That'd be a good reason.
We do not expect you next week. Anyway, that's my prediction.
I hope that for my wife. Absolutely.
You're going to have your hands
like
full,
it.
bud.
Yeah. I'm going to learn.
I'm going to tell you some real quick baby advice. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Those fingernails are really, really soft. So Joey was like, I don't know, 2 or 3
gosh.
weeks old.
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to say, Trevor?
Oh, yeah.
And Becky's like, man, his fingernails are really getting long. We should clip them. And I was like, I'll file them. And I took a regular fingernail file, like the fine side. And I just went, and all of a sudden, I mean, they're so soft. It was like right down to the, I don't know, where it started bleeding.
Oh, wow.
It's not the first mistake I made with Joey.
They stayed on. They just disappeared fast.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't. Oh, yeah, that'd
Okay.
be really bad. Like to pull them off. Eesh.
Do you remember how awkward it is holding a baby the first time? When
Yes.
you're like,
Yes. Because
what do I do with the head? You always feel like you're not supporting it
Mhm.
properly, and you're afraid somebody's going to come and take them away from you because
I
you're
know.
like letting the head fall backwards. They're pretty durable though, so you're good. I mean,
They're hardy.
they're hardy. Their heads
that's the only reason we're
well
here.
attached.
Right.
It wasn't until I started delivering kids that I was like, man, you got to pull on that head pretty hard when you're delivering them.
That's crazy.
Like, after weathering that storm, the head falling backwards once in a while is not such a big deal.
Was the person teaching you like, pull harder, pull harder?
Yeah,
How are we here again? Another week, another talk about birds.
Go right back to
We're
it.
back
All
to
right.
birds.
All right, we'll move. Matt wants to move on. Matt Grove from Montana has a couple kids,
Man,
and we don't have to talk about those kids or the birthing process. We just move on. That's what Matt sounds like. Everybody good?
man.
Who can read this question for us? We have a listener question.
I would be happy.
I
to.
thought you might, Trevor.
I love reading.
I know. Yeah,
I
it's
really
your
just
thing.
like being part of the crew, So this makes me feel like I'm
Trevor's going to read our question. Here we go.
front and center. Okay. So this is from Anthony Doherty. Doherty?
I thought it was Doherty.
Doherty?
Doherty?
Doherty. There you go. Doherty. Doherty. I feel like it was best.
Scottish
I don't
there.
know.
Doherty.
I'm going to stop murdering it.
Yeah.
Hey, I listened to your podcast on big rivers, and I have a quick question. I was surprised you didn't address it. Do big rivers hold bigger trout? For your group, if you add up all the whiskeys, as you call them, are most of them from bigger waters or smaller?
I would say whiskeys, 20-inch fish. That's
Yeah.
what we define, 20,
20-inch wild trout.
21, 22-inch. We call those whiskeys.
Yep.
I don't know. I think it's a split.
Yeah.
For me, between big rivers and small rivers. I think some big rivers have, depending on where you're at, have a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of whiskeys. I think there's a lot of bigger fish, 16 to 21-inch fish. I would say whiskeys. I don't care where you're at, aren't common.
Right.
There's obviously places you can get them more numerous, than others. But
Yeah.
For me, then you get into that next tier, which is namers, which is the 24-inch fish. And I've caught more of those in smaller creeks than bigger creeks.
No kidding.
Oh, without
That
a
is
doubt.
interesting. Yeah.
You have a
Yeah.
theory for that? On why?
I think maybe two things come to mind. One is lack of pressure.
Yeah.
And two is typically lower fish per mile.
Right
So
on.
I think, right, there's more dominant mature fish in certain small streams if you put the effort into finding them. I'm not saying everyone, because there's plenty of those small streams we catch plenty of small fish out of.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But I think, if you find the right characteristics, I think you can ambush a very mature brown trout if the system allows, right? Some of these water systems don't, they just don't have that fish to that caliber. Right? Every water system in the country isn't going to provide that opportunity for our listeners, right? But when you find the watershed that has the capability of producing a mature fish, then don't neglect those smaller tributaries. I correlated a little bit with hunting. Not all zones yield big mature bucks.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah,
sometimes nature's got to support that to grow big fish. That's just my thoughts.
That's interesting. Yeah. I feel like we could talk, we have at times, but we could talk about this a lot because it's an interesting topic. I'm curious what you think, Rob, with like the small streams and the lower density. Is it that those bigger fish become big because they don't have to compete for the amount of food, or that they don't have to spend energy searching out food?
They just eat the little ones.
Sure.
Yeah, I
just
think
eat the little
I think
ones.
some of it has to do with that. And look, they have to hit a certain age to get that big. Most of them, right? And I think that goes back, and I'm changing that, pivoting back to the pressure piece, right? You catch, fish get caught, so, mortality can happen, and you just get bothered. And, an old brown trout, you would think is the one that gets to be a little bit bigger than the other ones. And what is their diet? I mean, I think that's important, but we've talked about, in some streams where the fish population's so ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Does it limit the growth of some of the most mature fish out there because of the amount of food? I'm not an expert in this. I just I think this is a great, fun topic to explore and talk about, because I don't know if anyone has all the answers. There's always that big random fish in a weird spot and you're scratching your head. But I've done it enough to where it's fun to always have that hope.
Yeah.
I think there are characteristics of a big river that lend themselves to large trout, but not necessarily it being a big river makes fish grow large. So on a big piece of water, you may very well have places that are cold all year long, and you may have good places for protection from predation. You may have plenty of ample food opportunities. But I'm kind of with Grobe on this one. I think fish population has a lot to do with it. I kind of think when fish do have less of a competition or food chain to deal with, and there's only a few of them that they can manage kind of a healthy existence and continue to grow, that's when you start to see some of the bigger fish maybe be more common outside of human factors, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
But I think it's a combination of anything that could happen regardless of stream size.
That's a good way to put it. If you want to be an efficient and effective angler, you need to have your fly storage dialed in. This not only ensures that you'll have everything the fish want to eat, it also helps you stay focused and organized. Fulling mill fly boxes are designed for just this purpose. With no frills, these boxes are built to work. With custom-made durable polycarbonate shells, Fulling mill fly boxes are lined with dense, slotted foam that holds everything from streamers to tiny nymphs and dries. They feature strong magnetic closures, so they only open when you want them to. From their fly patch, which attaches to your bag, shirt, or waders, to their Tactical Max, which holds 960 flies, Fulling Mill's range of 10 fly boxes has something for every angler. Find them at fullingmill.com or ask for them at your local dealer. Smith Creek has always been about practical, durable gear, and this season they've added 2 more products to the lineup. Smith Creek's Wade Soft EVA wading belt is soft, flexible, and built to move with you, not against you. It cinches down without pinching and holds your gear steady with a tough Duraflex buckle and accessory clip. And if you're looking for an all-purpose carrying knife, Smith Creek's new Pike Tooth Knife Kit delivers. The Japanese steel blade comes razor sharp right out of the box, precise enough for stream-side tasks and tough enough for camp chores. It includes a Waterstone, wrist lanyard, and rugged neoprene sheath that's ready for trail, stream, or camping. So whether you're rigging up or dressing down, Smith Creek's got you covered. Like so many other Smith Creek products, the Wade Soft Wading Belt and the Pike Tooth Knife Kit have found a permanent home in my own fishing kit. Learn more at smithcreek.co. Yeah, for me, I don't know if I added up all the whiskeys, which again, like Matt said, they're rare.
Yeah.
A legit, wild river trout, uninfluenced by lake,
Yeah, good call.
Pretty rare. And some of them come from small waters. Some of them come from big waters where I almost expect to encounter something that's, let's say, 18 or bigger. And, I'll sell you the information, the location of those for $400 to $600. If anybody just want to get in touch, I'll sell you the location.
Hey now.
There's a popular YouTuber that'll do that for you too.
That's funny.
And we think that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
Let's not all go down that path.
Yeah,
No.
let's not do that.
You got
I think
any comments on that, guys?
oh, jeez. I think it's tough. Like, I think he believes in what he's doing. And it's clear he believes in what he's doing.
You're always the
because he's
nice guy.
well, I mean, I think,
It's okay.
I just think it's interesting. Like, I think anyone can be misguided in their life at different points, right? I mean, and there are plenty of people, I'm just thinking back through and I'm not even going to pick a side, but through the last 3 elections, through COVID, through all sorts of interesting things in our country, right?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people that feel very confident that they're right. And I think the lack of self-analysis or introspection and ability to kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't know, just think honestly about what you're doing. I think people can become deluded very quickly and begin to just confirm their own narrative with what they're willing to kind of take in until they just believe that like they're right and nobody else is right.
Fair enough.
My thing with that is, I've gone out, right, and hunted down these spots. And I don't know what kind of spots he's given up, right? But there's always a moment where I'm like, there's this like accomplishment. And then after the accomplishment, there's like, man, I wonder who else is, if any, found out about this.
Sure.
And I feel like it's like the responsibility of myself and the resource to maybe not reveal, right? Like I haven't revealed some of these to anyone out here. And I'm like, I take it to the point where sometimes I don't fish them. Like I know what's in there, and I'm like, I'm not gonna have my car exposed, on a spot and lead someone down this road. And so we always like to make it that easy in that platform. To me, is crossing a line.
Oh yeah.
It's just crossing a line. It's
way over the line.
It's not that resource isn't available, in my opinion, for someone like that to make money
To sell it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
in that situation, right?
Yeah. And think who you're sending in there. You're sending in the worst possible
Yeah.
humanity.
And
Right.
those people are
Somebody
gonna
who's
sell
willing to pay
themselves.
$400 for an easy spot that won't find it themselves.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
That's your buddy now.
The
That's
other
who's
part,
fishing your spot.
another part of the argument too is that I think there was maybe a moral or an ethical argument that the certain person tried to have, saying, "Well, I'm only going to sell it this amount of time." Okay, well, one, that's not a good argument, but two, every person you sell that to is going to go tell their friend,
Right.
and then their friend's going to tell their friend,
Yeah.
and so on and
Right.
so on times however many
Right.
people you sold it to. So it's not going to work out.
No, it's unsustainable. Didn't you say that, Trevor?
It is. It's unsustainable. Yeah. And that spot, how long until that spot's not a spot? Not very long, right?
Matt, you said it crosses the line, and I think it's high time that we all kind of draw some lines. Like, okay, social media is new. YouTube is relatively new, right? We're talking 10, 12, 15 years or whatever it's been since all of this stuff. Spot burning has become worse now
thing,
because,
sure.
it's tough. So everybody's kind of scattered with what are the rules? What are the expectations? Well, let's draw some clear lines. No, you don't sell spots. Okay, you don't sell spots. And I'll tell you one more thing. What that person is selling is that he doesn't have that kind of knowledge about some spots like you do, Matt. I mean, he doesn't.
Sure.
That's my opinion anyway, from what I see from the channel. I don't see a ton of big trophy fish there. It's just spots, man. It's just
that's the other thing. What tiered fish, you guys have watched. I haven't watched. I mean, if you're yielding a bunch of namers left and right,
he's not.
then yeah. But if not, you don't need to pay someone like you're saying to figure that out. Like
It's just
boots
silly
on the ground.
And the final point for me is like it's taking advantage of people who don't know. They're like, man, you could find that same data on just the State Fish Commission's wild trout list. Class A wild trout list.
Last thing, and this is just my assumptions. I feel like now more than ever, and I might be the old curmudgeon, it just feels like people want things laid up on a platter to make everything a little easier. And that's the part of the game that maybe I don't like. I don't like the progress the sport's made in that manner when it's that easy. And it's like, just a part of this sport's all about challenging yourself.
Yeah.
And it's the long game. And I think the real anglers out there play the long game, and they're the ones that are well-rounded. And the other ones you can see take the shortcuts, and they're pretty easy to point out.
Yeah.
The ones that are posers.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say about that. Mic drop.
I think we should. I know we've had a podcast on spot burning, but I think some of that stuff needs to be brought back into conversation again.
That's interesting because
It's gotten worse and worse through the years, and I think there's more to say, or at least maybe a bigger emphasis to really put on it.
Well, look, I think there's one alleyway we haven't hit yet to ruffle the feathers, and I think it's not. This isn't. I want to say political. It can't be political, right? Because it's like you got to draw that middle ground on what's right for the sport, right?
Yeah.
And like you can have opinions on both sides of the fence on that, but it's it's in the fishing industry. A lot of folks don't venture out and dock. You listen to the Meat Eater podcast, right?
Yeah.
I think he does a tremendous job at
Yeah.
sticking straight down the middle and calling out both sides of the
of
the fence.
Yeah.
And I think he does it to the point where I think he gets respect because it's just truthful.
Yeah.
It's just the truthfulness of, people want to pull politically, but it's really not. It's
Right.
he says both sides give you the bone is what he says. And I like that. I'm like, yeah, both sides do give you the bone.
he's probably way more educated on all. I'm sure he is.
He's pretty smart dude.
So a long time ago, we had a question from Anthony Doherty, and we broke away from that. But there you go, Anthony. We don't always find the big fish in the big rivers. Sometimes they hold them, sometimes they don't. Don't sell your spots either.
Man.
All right, here we go. Why are some trout more selective, and what makes them picky? So like I said in the intro, some of these factors are natural, and others are about the angler or what we do to the fish, really how we affect their habits. Maybe we can call that an artificial influence, right? We did a podcast a couple years ago now. We did 2 podcasts where we talked about angler pressure, what it does to the fish and what it does to the fishing. Yeah, 2 podcasts back to back. You can go check that out, which kind of goes along the same lines as this artificial influence, right? But let's start with some natural things because I think these are less often considered. What are the natural things that make a trout selective?
I mean, the first thing that pops to mind for me is just availability of food, so a fish that's presented with a plethora of options of what to eat throughout the day is going to obviously be able to survive while being more selective.
Yeah.
Whether it's due to the the ease of capturing the particular food that he'd like, whether it's the taste, of something specific that he'd like. But yeah, when, at the very end of the day, fish are survivalists, right? They're part of the natural order, and animals don't have the luxury of being selective to the point of losing weight, and so I think that's always the balance that they're on. And in our waterways around here, we talk about it all the time that they do for a good part of the year, they have a plethora of options to choose from.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes our fish quite selective, and we see that.
I like that, man. That's one of my favorite. I just think, you could go down the rabbit hole of this, but it's a lot of food to choose from, a lot of different stages of insects that is hatching, and some bugs hatch, at certain times of day than others, and what are those fish keying in on? To make them selective. Is it the nymphs? Is it the emergers? Is it the spinners? Is it the mayflies? And are they really being selective? Are they just keying in on the food form that is available to them? And I like to think that not all fish, are going to be eating the exact same thing at the same time if there's a lot of food forms out there, and so that to me is a big one, and I think it's what makes fly fishing fun, and it's something that it's easy to forget about on the stream, when you're fishing those confidence flies, but really it's what's happening underneath the surface. There's all of this stuff happening. And if you can crack that code, crack that selectivity of those fish, right? That's what fishing's all about.
Let me bring up too, the way I think about selectivity is not necessarily like, hey, they're only eating one thing, but that they're just picky about the drift, about how natural does that really look. we've talked about whether we were trying to attract a fish or convince a fish. Are you trying to make them curious or convince them? Are you trying to make them go, hey, what the heck is that? I got to test that out. Or are you trying to make them go, hey, I see that every day. That looks a lot like what I'm comfortable eating. I'm going to eat that. And a picky fish or a selective fish to me means like, I don't care what they're eating. They're still more selective about it. If they're eating, I don't know, if they are eating mostly sulfur spinners, which is coming up here. Well, it's every evening right here. They're eating sulfur spinners. And when they are, that needs to be a really nice presentation. During the day, we can get them on nymphs of many different types. It doesn't just have to be a sulfur. They'll eat crest bugs. Crest bug the other day seemed to be, a crest bug unweighted without a bead, seemed to be, whatever, it made a difference a couple days in a row. Crest bug, I don't know. They probably would have eaten other things, but we were testing other things. All right. But that drift needed to be really, really nice, really, let's say, natural. And so that was a selective trout during the day on nymphs, and it was a selective trout, a picky trout, let's say, during the spinner fall for sulfurs, for the last hour of daylight too. Couple different kinds of selectivity. And that's what I mean by that word, by that term, by that concept, is not just like, are they feeding on one thing? That's cool too. But really, like, they need a good drift presentation.
Sure. And you think, look at all the naturals they're going to see.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
And will they become more selective as the hatch progresses? Right.
Yeah.
That's a natural
Sure.
thought process to have, right? That the longer that hatch goes, the more bugs. I mean, every day at the same time, they're looking up and they're eating the same size, same shade or whatnot. And they get smarter, right?
Yeah. By natural influences, because they see it all the time. Since 2006, Yeti has been building products for anglers who fish hard and share an addiction for the woods and the water. Yeti changed the industry with their legendary coolers by featuring rugged but simple designs built to last for generations and stand up to whatever Mother Nature might bring. Yeti now takes that same functional and elegant design to everything in their lineup, from soft coolers to drinkware, bags, and more. Introducing the Easy Access Ranchero Backpack. It's the latest to join Yeti's lineup of tough-as-nails bags, and it's another part of my fishing gear that keeps me organized and ready on the water. The Ranchero Backpack features a cutting-edge rip-zip opening, so you can quickly tear the bag open to see the gear you need in just seconds. With smart internal organization, there's no more digging through your backpack for tippet spools or fly boxes. And for even more convenience, a handy vertical zipper allows you to grab gear at the bottom without having to unpack from the top. Get in, get out, and get going. Check out the Ranchero line of backpacks at yeti.com or find them at a Yeti retailer store near you. So I want to tell you about Tajima Direct. They make the best polarized lenses on the market. Tajima gives me perfectly clear vision and more detail with less eye strain, so I see more fish. The process is simple. Take a pair of your sunglasses and send them in to Tajima. In short order, you'll get your frames back with your choice of lens tints that are specifically designed for fly fishing. With both prescription and non-prescription, Tajima's patented lens technology results in the best lenses I've ever worn, including every top brand out there. So I wear polarized lenses all day, every day, on the water. And I've been rotating in Tajima's brown 15 green mirror for average light days, and their yellow-green 40 silver mirror for the cloudy low-light days that I love to fish. I can tell you that for me, having Tajima's prescription lenses in the right lens tints has been a game changer. I put my glasses on, and I don't think about them again until the end of the trip. Send in your own frames today. Visit tajima-direct.com. That's TAJIMA-direct.com. Upgrade your lenses and see what you've been missing.
I was curious, do you think that what changes as a hatch moves forward is that the trout becomes more educated to the actual natural, or that they have enough experience from angling pressure that they know what doesn't look like the natural? Like, what is it that is it that they see so many naturals that they really have a solid idea in their mind of what the natural is? Or is it that they've seen an artificial and they really know the artificial? Or are the two the same thing?
Yeah, I think certainly a combination of the two. And I think it can change depending on what the hatch is and how much pressure that hatch sees.
Sure.
Yeah.
Some hatches see a lot more angler pressure with a wide variety of imitations, and depending on how heavy it is and things of that nature, I think sometimes the fish become more tuned in, let's say during a hatch that goes on for a long period of time, to the drift more than the pattern. Because I think they're very accustomed to seeing things floating freely without any drag, without anything that's encumbering them. And if you can replicate that with something that is at least in the ballpark and get into their rhythm, I think you're going to have a lot better chance than just the fact that a lot of people have been fishing imitations.
Right on. It might not just be drag free either. If they're really, really targeting crayfish,
whatever
that are exposed, that are maybe in a
is
molting
doing,
phase, that week where they're molting in the summer, that could be their primary food form. Because maybe the main hatches are over, and I don't know, maybe those crayfish move in a certain way, and those trout are on that. Like Matt said a moment ago, I feel like we would all agree that these fish are looking for certain things. The longer it goes on, the longer a hatch goes on, we all know, the more picky they get. And I feel like you could have zero angler pressure on, a stream that gets, no people ever fishing it. And those trout would still get even more picky.
I agree.
Yeah, and there's a reason you can't just toss a number 12, green drake during the sulfurs, right?
Right,
like
they won't eat it. It will not.
Right. I mean, and that coincides at times, but I'm trying to, I can't throw a salmon fly in September and think the fit. So the selectivity, a lot has to do with what's going on out there, right? And what they've been looking at and what they've been used to eating. And maybe they have a shorter, I don't know if they have short-term memory, because somehow they find a way to get back to where they were spawning or where they were born, right? Yeah. And that's more of a smell. But like when it comes to the diet, I think they get really locked into what's available out there.
You almost expect it.
Yeah.
Well, not almost. I'm sure they do expect that spinner fall of sulfurs that's happening every evening. It's going to go on for like 4 more weeks here.
Sure.
And all across the country, all across the world, really, those trout they know it. I said it a couple weeks ago, like they know it so much better than we do.
Yeah.
They know what's going to happen. Sometimes I think they're waiting for that spinner fall. Like, I'm not going to eat right now.
I wonder too, like, is there a difference between a trout being picky versus just wild trout being moody? Like, is that the same thing? Sometimes they may not be eating at all, or sometimes they feel like these trout are stubborn for no good reason. Like, let's say the moments before the spinner fall, where you'd swear there's no fish in the creek and everything you're doing just isn't working. And then 5 minutes later, every head is rising. And you're thinking, were they just not eating up until now, or were they being picky about something else, even though I tried the emergers and I tried the nymphs and I tried every other stage of life prior to this? I don't know. There might be something there.
That's a great thought. And you wonder at that time of night, like, has the availability of food depleted? And that last form of food is literally in the air, and it just, boop, it falls. And, of course you're going to have a nymph or two in the water. But I just think if you get underneath there at times where the nymphs are escaping to emerge, what that looks like, as opposed to 7 o'clock at night when all that activities happen throughout the day. And now you're just sitting there with bait fish. And let's face it, the water, Austin, is as warm as it's going to be. You know what I mean? And maybe it takes a prolific food source to really engage that fish, to expend more energy to eat.
Those are great thoughts.
And a lot of times, I really do believe they're waiting for it. I remember I fished with Lauren Williams a couple times, and he got that thought in my head. He said, sometimes I just think they're waiting for that. That's what he's talking about. It was a spinner.
It's cool.
They know, again, when it goes on for a week or 2 or 4 or 5 weeks, they know when the easiest food is going to happen. And like you said, Trevor, if you have a river that has so much food in it, so many opportunities, trout are in no rush to eat. I tell my clients this all the time. These are some of the pickiest fish you're ever going to fish for. And people will say, oh, because it gets a lot of angler pressure. And I often say, well, look upstream, look downstream. How many people we see? We rarely see anybody.
Right.
And I believe it's more because of the prevalence of food and then temperatures, which we should talk about that in a moment.
I was just going to say that too.
But like you said, Trevor, there's so much food. How many opportunities does a trout sitting in the middle of a riffle have in 1 hour? Probably like 100 chances to eat. You know, seriously. And I don't care if it's the middle of May where you have like all the mayflies and a bunch of caddisflies just popping, or if it's even in the middle of winter. They still have all those crest bugs and scuds and other immature forms of those nymphs that occasionally get kicked up. Yeah. In the winter, there's fewer, let's say, easy opportunities. There's still a ton. There's so much food there. Maybe it's not 100 opportunities in 1 hour, but it's still 25 or 50. They got all that chance to eat. They're in no rush. Matt, you said that when you first went out to Montana. You're like, man, it's like when they're eating, they got the feed bag on.
Yeah, I mean, it's neat to discuss the temperature thing. And look, I think some folks, you know, the thermal influence that can occur can make these wild trout lethargic. And maybe they feel like they're, you know, more selective. But let's face it, and you guys definitely have it, you know, come late July, maybe in August, well, maybe the temperatures do creep up a little bit higher, right? They're not exactly ideal where they're at most of the year back your way, which is, you know, September through mid-June, sometimes late June. You guys have pretty much optimal thermal temperatures, right? And then you have 2 months where maybe they get a little bit up north and those fish get lethargic. Well, they can be selective, right?
Yeah.
And so don't forget that when you're out chasing. There's a lot of factors at play.
You mentioned temperature before, Dom, too. And trout are what we call ectothermic vertebrates, which means that instead of reacting to the temperature, right? So like they're the opposite of us, basically. So they just become the temperature of their environment, right? So you catch a fish in 38 degree water and you have a 38 degree fish. For the most part, they're maybe run a couple degrees above, but that's why their metabolism slows so much as the water temperatures cool. Where humans, like, you know, you all probably know this, that in the wintertime you get hungrier, right? We're colder and we want to eat
Just
more
to
so that we burn more, because we burn to create our own heat, right? Because we're endothermic, so we produce heat to kind of react to and kind of counteract our environment. So I think temperature is huge, and I think it's probably emphasized by the majority of anglers. Sure. I think that we think about it a lot, obviously, and I think a lot of serious anglers do think about it. But I think sometimes like a day where there's not much of a bite has not much else to do other than a quick temperature change, maybe for the warmer, you know, when the metabolism slows.
And some species are more sluggish than others at certain temperatures.
Totally.
You know, I can't speak on behalf of brook trout, but like I know cutthroat trout hate temperatures as they start approaching that 70 degree range. Like they just shut it down based on survival, right? Their home range is very selective, and that's just how they operate. Where brown trout they can handle some of those steeper temperatures a little bit better than other fish. So, there's definitely variables there to consider as well.
Did you say ectothermic?
Yeah, they're ectotherms.
Is that kind of like ectoplasm in the Ghostbusters?
Spangler.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Just wanted to make that connection.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
I think Young Love should call his kid Spangler.
Spangler Dando.
It's a good name. Put it on the list.
Another thing we should talk about is really the species as being more selective, right? We always trout, right? It's always trout. But hey, the brown trout is the most selective. We've gone through this in some other podcasts. I'll leave a link to that podcast. I don't think there's much question that the brown trout is the most selective, then maybe the rainbow and the brook trout, cutties. And where's the bull trout, Matt? Where's the bull trout in terms of selectivity?
I don't target those. I don't have much.
Well, you're not allowed, right?
I caught one on a purple chubby before, so they're not that selective.
But anyway, the point is,
I can't speak on both bull trout.
Right on. Anyway, the point is you got to know what you're
Pretty
fishing
aggressive,
for.
I think.
Right. And then stock trout are going to be more eager, less selective. I don't care how long they're in the river. They're genetically bred to be more aggressive feeders. Sure. And yet, yes, if they're in there 2 or 3 years and holding over, which is pretty rare, by the way, in a lot of places, they'll be more similar to a wild trout. But, all right, it's not the same thing. It's not. Nope. And so, they're not as selective. They're never going to grow to be as selective as a wild trout, especially that wild brown trout. And honestly, that's why I love the wild brown trout the most. But that's also what I have to fish the most, too, in fairness.
Why don't stock trout are more selective in their own way.
What's that, Austin?
Stock trout are more selective in their own way.
Oh, we've talked about that. Like, you can't trust them. Like, just do what you're supposed to do.
Erratic.
Eat that spinner.
It's the Bizarro trout.
That's right.
Like Bizarro Jerry.
Selective in their own way.
Do you guys think, last question on natural before we move on, that light, sun, things of that nature can cause fish to be more selective?
Oh, like other conditions.
Just high sun. I'm just saying.
Well, even like low water too.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
For sure. They'll be more selective because of the conditions around them. Yeah.
Okay.
More wary almost.
Yep. I almost think of like each trout having this like a shaded area around them in which they're willing to move for food.
Right.
And like that shrinks and expands based on their vulnerability or their own perceived vulnerability to predation, right?
Conditions.
And so, conditions. And even metabolism and probably even, other factors, dominance and stuff. But I think like you could probably add all those factors into this constantly fluctuating throughout the day window where with high sun, clear water, low water, warmer temperatures, that band of feeding comes in so narrowly that you may not get a fish to eat, or you have to put it right on them in order to get them to eat. And it has to be something they want to eat.
And that's selectivity. That's being picky.
Exactly.
Like, I'm not going to eat that. My range is narrower because of high sun and low water. That's a big deal. I mean, around here, we've had some extra water lately, and I'm loving it. And I find a lot of anglers as I'm guiding or just even talking to guys. I was talking to a guy when I was running upstream in the canyon this evening, and a guy's like, "Oh man, it's tough because the water's high." I'm like, "What?" I didn't say that to him, but I'm thinking like, "What?" It's not muddy at all. It is not muddy. It's just cloudy.
It's great.
And I'm thinking like, no,
this is great. Yeah.
Even for dry flies, I would not agree with that. I don't think it's tougher because the water's high.
It's probably not used to the speed. Oftentimes, that's what
that's a good point.
People can find difficult, even when the clarity is good and the weighting is possible. The speed.
It's harder to get good drifts. You're saying because the water's moving too fast for him to necessarily get good drifts.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
People don't respond well to those variables, right?
Oh, right.
I mean, that's just they have a hard time adjusting to the conditions when we all maybe want it at a certain CFS, gin clear, no wind, but that's just not the way it is. And so to your point, you might be shocked at what you experience when you go out there and just say, you know what, think different, right? When their conditions change, so should your approach.
Nice. So should we move into kind of some artificial, artificial influence?
Guys going for a jog, blowing my bank up the canyon.
Come on now. I'm not affecting those fish. I do run there a lot.
Satellite pressure.
Those trout are so used to me, they just keep eating. Can I
we
start
talked
with
about this?
Yeah, Trevor.
No.
No, please. You got better ideas.
Well, I was
than
just remembering back to when we talked about angling pressure as a separate topic.
Yeah,
there have been some legitimate scientific surveys and studies done on this, and I think they were done in Patagonia or New Zealand. I forget where we were reading about, but either way, we found that there was a fairly marked difference in trout behavior for a period of time after pressure, or after being caught, or after being fished over. And that increased the more times they were caught or the more times they were fished over, to the point that there were days sometimes where they would shut down. And so I think, we can't underestimate how much impact angling pressure has. And clearly they need to eat still. And so if you're in a location like we are where fish, certain times of the year, they rarely are not fished over in a day, they still have to eat, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to adapt to that by either tolerating a level of danger or feeding selectively in terms of the time of day.
That's nice.
I think the things that contribute to that angling pressure, like what causes not just the number of people out there, but what is it that really, causes those fish to become more picky? And I often think it's bad drifts, bad presentations.
Yeah.
A lot of that educates those fish, in my opinion, to cause them to become more selective, which Dom, you hinted on just the fact that you got to get a better presentation. It's not that you can't catch these selective fish.
Yeah.
It just causes you to be more pristine with your presentation.
Yeah. Get it right.
Yeah. Right.
Less forgiving trout.
In fact, our drifts are so good, I would venture to say that the fish are just becoming shy to the naturals after we catch them.
That's right. We all accidentally educated them on the perfect drift. Damn it.
Yeah. We're helping out all those crappy anglers.
That's the way it goes. Whether it's after a fishing trip or at a backyard fire, you can bet the Troutbitten crew has a case of New Trail Broken Heels along with us. It's honestly our favorite beer. This hazy IPA is smooth and full-bodied. Hand-selected Citra hops lead to notes of bright clementine and juicy ruby red grapefruit. Broken Heels is a keeper. New Trail beer is proudly brewed in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and delivered cold to your favorite craft beer retailer every week. At New Trail, it's not about being the best angler. It's about getting out there. So enjoy nature's moments and reward yourself for a day well fished with New Trail Broken Heels. It's Troutbitten's favorite beer. Tactical Fly Fisher was founded by Fly Fishing Team USA angler Devin Olson to bring anglers cutting-edge gear and techniques inspired by the World Fly Fishing Championships. Tactical Fly Fisher's goal is to supply you with the latest and best fly fishing gear and to help you learn how to use it through their videos and books. Whether you need flies, fly tying supplies, a new rod or reel, or any other fly fishing equipment, they've got you covered. Check them out at tacticalflyfisher.com and use the code TB15 to get 15% off one order, excluding rods, reels, waders, and boots. Visit tacticalflyfisher.com. I think this angler pressure, when you start talking about selectivity, the first thing people say to me is like, oh yeah, all that angler pressure. I mentioned that earlier. And I think the natural stuff matters just as much, probably more in this region anyway, for why they're so selective. They eat all year round because you have temperatures that are stable. It's not like they get to the point where they go, oh, it's so cold, I can't eat. Or you're saying, Trevor, it's what are they?
Right.
Endothermic?
Ectothermic.
Ah, damn it. That's what they are. And anyway, they need to, they don't have to eat as much. I think natural stuff influences them just as much, let's say, as artificial. But the average angler is like, oh yeah, all that angler pressure. Definitely though, this adds up. And you were saying something, Matt, that made me kind of think about guys from Connecticut. It's Zach and Derek from Connecticut. They got a podcast called Chasing Alphas. And I listen to their podcast quite a bit. I like these guys. And they'll say, like, hey, these trout are really, really extra picky. They especially say the big trout there are really, really picky. And they say, like, trout know when they're playing the game. That's the phrase they use. I find that very interesting. I feel like when our trout know they're playing the game or like somebody's around, they are done. You are not going to catch those fish because they know that, like, playing the game. No. They're not playing a game. They're like, whoa, somebody's around. I am not eating. They'll either bail, get the hell out of there, or they're not eating. You can sometimes see a bigger fish and they are not going to eat. And then you get close enough and they finally bail. Anyway, I just want to get your opinion on that. Do you think that trout will, let's say, know they're playing the game and still stick around and eat?
I think in the right lie.
Okay.
I think if they're in a, but maybe maybe they don't know they're playing the game if they're in that right lie.
That's what I mean. I don't think they know.
So maybe they continue and they feel confident where they're at. But, I think if there's any sense of
Anglers.
anglers or
Yeah.
oddities happening. Those big fish can, outside of a few circumstances, those fish know how to retreat, I'll say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we don't have the kind of angler pressure that some places do. Okay, so what if you had an angler every 20 minutes? I'm not fishing that kind of place, right? But if you had an angler every 20 minutes, every piece of daylight, like that trout still has to eat, right? And
He's
so
eating at
maybe
night.
they would know they're playing the game, somebody's around, but I'm still going to eat, right? They still have to eat.
Yeah, those are different rules of the game. I would argue.
That's a good
to
way
say.
to put it.
I mean, my entire goal is to make sure they don't know I'm playing the game. But
That's nice.
Hey,
That's
I don't know
nice.
those,
Yeah.
those type of trout. Like,
They're so smart.
I think they know they've grown accustomed to certain foot traffic, and they just sort of have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Deal with it and
won't
still eat
stop
'cause they
them
gotta grow.
completely. Right, they got to still eat, and I think they just they find different areas to reside in, or I don't know, to function. They're not going to stop their natural, desires to eat. They have
Still
to
got to
eat.
eat. That's right.
But they may become more selective. Maybe they move. Who knows? We can't. It's not like we keep track
No.
on all the trout either, right? We can't see
Right.
where they're headed, where they're going.
Well, yeah, and we don't fish everywhere, right? And people from these regions where they tell me, oh yeah, if we looked upstream, there'd be 5 guys above you, and if we looked downstream, there'd be 5 guys below you. Like, I'm not fishing that water. I'm not.
Sure.
And if I encountered that, I'm going somewhere else. Anyway, I know that there are plenty of listeners out there who do have that on a daily basis. So those trout may know they're playing the game. Maybe this whole angler pressure thing is quite different then. What about, can I ask you this? What about tippet shy? I got my opinions on it. Are they tippet shy or not?
I think it's all drift related, right? I think it's all like the movement that the tippet allows of the fly. I think a tippet shy fish is shy of the fact that it has a 2x tether tied to it, so it can't move naturally. Not that they're actually seeing the tippet and recognizing it for what it is.
Yeah,
That's my belief too.
I'm with you guys on that. I mean, I think you just we talk about it on here, right? You have to pair the fly with the appropriate tippet that you're fishing. And I can, I fish 1x, 2x on some of my,
On nymphs?
for salmon flies and dry flies, salmon
No
flies,
kidding.
golden stones, they're number 4 hooks. You're not, you're the one that the tippet twists, what I mean? And
right.
you're going to fish you match the tippet according to the fly size.
That's right.
You're fishing. And I think that's that tippet shyness, if you're fishing a size 20 and somehow got 3x in there, well, that's going to
Can't
be a
move.
really unnatural fly presentation.
Right.
Do you know we're the oddballs for believing that?
Yeah.
See, I don't know if people would necessarily disagree if you explained it that way. Like,
Right. I don't know that they think
I
about
think
it.
what they would agree with is that if you attach 4x to your size 22 olive and it doesn't allow that olive to lay and to drift naturally like it could on 7x, they wouldn't disagree with that being the reason that fish is rejecting your fly. But if you could ask them if you could get the exact same presentation with 4x versus 6x or 7x, would they eat it? I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's split, but I'd have to think maybe more on the other side.
You might be right.
I remember last fall, my brother and I were fishing a Traco spinner fall in September. And, we were fishing 5X tippet on those, it's size 20, 22 fly and catching fish. And some folks would say, you go 7X,
Right. Gotta have it.
in the summer and you have to do it that way. I don't know. I said I don't know if you have to do it that way. Now, what is your take on if you're fishing a gin clear, slow run? Like, would you think twice about the tippet selection you have or no? Doesn't matter the water, like you're good on 6X or 5X with that trico, or does that make
Well,
sense? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll think twice about it because that's the kind of person I am. And I'm constantly questioning the things that I think I know. Like Trevor said, for me, my answer is that it comes back to drift quality. If I can get the same drift, like Austin was saying, with that 4X on that trico versus 7X, if it's the exact same drift, I don't think they care that it's attached to 4X. I don't think they see 4X and go, oop, not eating that. But 7X, oh, okay, I'll eat that. Because the line is thinner? No, because the drift quality is better. I have people tell me all the time, well, hey, man, I was fishing 4X on these nymphs, and I wasn't catching anything. As soon as I went down to 7X on my nymphs, I was catching fish. It's because your drifts got better. And I would say it's way easier, I mean it, way easier up top or underneath. If you're trying, especially, really, we're talking about dead drift. If you're trying to get a dead drift, it's way easier with a thinner tippet. There are benefits, actually, to keeping the tippet a little bit thicker, besides fighting fish, but we won't go down that line of thinking. But I choose basically 5X, 4X for my nymphs. I don't like going thinner, but I will. I'll go down to 6X even for my nymphs. And dude, I'll tell you, I've tried it. I've gone down to 7X. Yeah, it's been a lot of years since I attached anything to 8X, like anything to 8X. And that's not by any ethical stance or anything, any superiority, whatever. I just haven't bought 8X in a long time because I don't feel like I need it. However, Matt, I guess to really answer your question, I A/B test like constantly out there. If I get anything going, if I get 10 fish in an hour, I'm going, this is good action. How can I change things? How can I, like, why are they eating? Is it the 7X? And then I'll go to 4X. And I can only count a handful of times where that actually made a difference. If I get quality drifts, same fly, go to 4X or 5X, I still continue to catch fish. Basically, that's where my pretty strong opinion comes from. But I'm also open-minded about it.
It takes discipline to do what you're doing, right? I mean, that's,
Well, I get a lot of time on the water.
Yeah, I mean, that's great feedback. That's great, being able to pivot when you're catching them, like you said, 10 fish an hour.
To me, that's good action, right?
Sure.
I mean, come on.
That's great. We always had that scale, right? I mean, that's excellent
Right.
fishing.
Yeah,
Anything
it is.
when you're catching them like that. But it's neat to think about, right? I mean, that's why, there's these questions out here because there's so many variables in that moment. You could probably come up with 4 or 5 things as to why or why not the fish weren't eating, right? But when it comes down to it, if you keep the fundamental aspect of drag-free drift at the forefront of your mind, that likely is the reason that you're not catching them or the fish seems selective. And that could be because your tippet size doesn't match your fly.
Yeah, it has to have the ability to have some movement. I'm not going to take that trico and put it on 2X. Nobody's doing that and getting a good dead drift.
I agree with that.
So I also meet a lot of anglers who will tell me, hey, those trout got educated because they got caught on that fly. So now they won't eat that fly anymore because they got caught a couple times on, I don't know, a squirmy or a green weenie or something, especially identifiable. Like people seem to believe that. The more bold the fly is, the easier it is for a trout to get turned off of that fly. Like, oh, I'm not eating anything chartreuse anymore. I think that these trout are educated just as much by bad drifts. You said that a minute ago, Matt. Like bad drifts on any fly, if it's a gold bead, something. If it's a copper bead, other thing. If it is a green weenie or a pink worm, just by seeing bad drifts, they're going, I'm not eating pink things. I'm not eating those green things or gold beads. They don't need to be caught to learn anything. We've talked about this before, but it belongs in this podcast, I think.
Yeah, that's a definite. I mean, once they see that, you hear that term, English can educate the trout, and I'm a firm believer in that. And I think when the pressure's high, when the season's on, you guys are going through prime season, it's just natural that those fish are going to see more artificial flies than they typically do throughout the year. And I would say that one thing that makes your area so tremendous is your trout per mile densities are so dense that when you really think about those riffles and like, the heads you see rising, like it's just a fraction of what's actually in that river. So you can still catch those fish. And even though the trout may get more selective, you guys are lucky because there's so many trout. They're not, the next one moves in, or, fish move around. And so if you're fishing a watershed that gets a lot of pressure and has low densities, and I don't think we elaborated too much on fish per mile in the certain watersheds that you may or may, some of our listeners are in or whatnot, you have to take that into consideration, because less fish, less chance, more pressure on less fish, right? What's the result? Well, harder fish, right? Naturally.
Yeah. And pressure to me is just drifts. They do not have to be caught to learn something.
Sure. That's a great point.
I mean, we've seen that all of our waters, relatively speaking, are pressured. And I think pattern-wise, you hit on this bead color. Everybody that's an infant, or at least a large majority of it now, today, are using bead-headed flies.
Yeah.
And I think especially, like, they'll become accustomed to or shy from just a fly platform or a fly feature.
Sure.
It could be a pheasant tail, or it could be a waltz horn, but if they've both got a big shiny gold bead in the front, like, to them, that might be the same thing on most days.
Sure.
And I'm starting to feel that out there. I'm starting to see some of that stuff maybe not be as consistent as it once was, not just a worm or whatever it might be, a squirmy. I think it's getting a little bit more refined than that.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, anything else, guys?
I think there, like we've acknowledged, there's a lot of factors that contribute to fish's selectivity. And I think it pays for the angler to know those factors, because knowing those factors can help you avoid discouragement and actually target the fish in an effective way.
Nice.
So selective trout are often viewed as something that can be frustrating, or your adversary. But at the end of the day, do we like selective trout? And do we maybe like them more sometimes?
I'm not answering that.
Yeah, I know. It's a loaded question. I just feel like I'm reflecting on, the difference in experience between fishing stocked waters and fishing our wild waters.
Yeah.
And I think to me, it is more rewarding to fish over our selective fish. But part of that's because I've put in time to try to understand those factors that make our fish selective, and to try to sharpen my craft to the point that I can catch those fish. And when I don't have a fish that cares, it makes me feel like that my work is not being rewarded appropriately, or there's an element of satisfaction that's lost.
That's nice.
Yeah. If you hit a home run every time you went up to bat, would you care about hitting home runs anymore?
Right. You wouldn't value the home run. I wrote the article about "We Don't Want Easy Fishing." That was the title.
Yeah.
Now, for me, and I said this in the intro, I fish for trout because they are selective, because they are pickier, let's say, than a smallmouth bass and other species. Definitely pickier than a fall fish, right? We talked about them last week. I like that pickiness, but I've thought about this a lot. I especially like that natural pickiness, like we talked about tonight. All those natural factors, I'm cool with that. Great. They're picky because of the temperature being stable, relatively stable all year long. They're picky because they have so much to eat. That makes sense. That's cool. That's natural. What I've come to accept, but I don't necessarily like, is the artificial pickiness, because they've been fished over so much, because they have seen gold beads and pink worms, right? Like, we've done things to them. I don't like that necessarily. I've come to accept it.
Yeah.
And it's part of my fishing now. But when I do get to fish areas that are relatively untouched, and there are plenty, honestly, around here that just do not get much angler pressure. And I know I'm fishing for more of a pure fish, less influenced by anglers. When I know that it's that experience, I like that better. So I don't love the extra pressure thing and what it does to the fish. Mm-hmm. I suppose that's consistent with how I picked the waters that I fish in the first place. I and you guys, I know, we're always looking for that most natural experience that we can find. We'll walk further we'll fish for wild trout in the first place, but we'll walk further and try to not see anybody all day, and just have that pure, the closest I can get to that pure experience of the way things naturally should be, I would say, is what I'm always striving for. But I'll accept the other stuff.
Yeah, well said.
All right, so Austin Dando, will you read us out?
I will. Okay, so remember, the Troutbitten Project is a free resource for all anglers. The Troutbitten website hosts over 1,500 articles, videos, and podcasts with endless stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more. Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and the tags too. Be sure to find the Troutbitten YouTube channel, now featuring the Troutbitten Tip Series, Fly Fishing the Monorig, and the Troutbitten Fly Box, all in collaboration with Wilds Media. You'll also find the Fish and Film videos and the new Riverside series, all in their own playlist on Troutbitten YouTube. Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten Podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and leave a comment, because that really helps. Till next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, find your life on the water.
And trout are what we call ectothermic vertebrates, which means that instead of reacting to the temperature, right? So like they're the opposite of us, basically.
You're going to have your hands full, bud.
Yeah.